Hi there, I'm Henry Reed. I'll be your personal mentor for this Atlantic University home study course called Introduction to Transpersonal Counseling. There are many things you could look at in the field of transpersonal counseling. There's more going on in transpersonal counseling than we could possibly cover in one single course. So what should we look at? So we examine some of the ways in which people have learned how to do specific types of healing, like with crystals, with laying on of hands, breath work and body work, past life regression, LSD therapy, channeling, using spirit guides. The list of different therapies goes on. It's endless. Or maybe what we want to do is look at the different kinds of problems that people have. We could also look at all of the different types of spiritual problems that people have. That might include psychic awakening, spiritual emergencies, spirit possession. We can also look at the transpersonal approach to treating problems that we don't ordinarily associate with spirituality, such as depression, stress, overeating, alcoholism. These problems have been with us for a long time, but today they're being looked at in a new way. You're probably familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous and all the recovery movements that spawned. That's a very good opening into spirituality and spiritual counseling. It's something that has many people in its grip. Today, we're looking at a spiritual treatment of depression that involves a journey of the soul, a dark sea journey, looking at depression in terms of the possibility for transformation. Another very important topic within the field of transpersonal counseling would be professional issues. This could involve not only the management of your office, your financial affairs, but of course professional ethics. Another area related to that might be the management of the treatment session, from the greeting of the client, working through with the session, how to deal with particular things that come up. What do we mean by illness? What do we mean by health? And what's the nature of healing? These are important questions, not just philosophical in nature, but they also are going to affect how a transpersonal counselor views their work and how they approach working with a person and performing healing or being in a healing way. So taking into account all of this material that we could possibly examine in a course on transpersonal counseling, what is it we're going to do? Well, we're going to look at how to be a healing presence, how to achieve that state of consciousness such that when you're sitting with a client or being with them, you're being with them in a healing way. We think that this is very important, for no matter what kind of situation you find yourself in with people, whether it's an actual counseling role or in any type of interaction you have with somebody, you always have a chance to be of service. You can be caring and you can be helpful. Well, what exactly does that mean, being caring and helpful? This is something we want to explore in this class. We also want to give you a chance to actually practice, to explore different ways of being with another person and seeing what it feels like to be with them in a way that's healing, that's helpful, to explore your ability to care and the impact of that caring on the other person and on yourself as well too. There are many different philosophies of healing, but they all seem to come back to the same concept of love, and we'll want to explore that, not just philosophically, but in a live, tangible way that you can actually feel and experience for yourself. So we hope you really enjoy this course. As we explore what it means to be a healing presence, think about your times out in nature. When you've gone out of doors to seek some peace and solitude, a chance to restore yourself, what is it that nature has contributed? How has it cheered you up? Did it give you suggestions? Did it send you energy? What did it do exactly? There's something very peaceful and acceptant about nature that perhaps contains a secret about how it means to be a healing presence. You can't beat laying in a hammock for developing a healing frame of consciousness. And I did a lot of work in this little flying carpet, this rocking womb. And now I'm going to be sharing with you a lecture that I gave in an Atlantic University classroom. And I'd like to alert you before the lecture a little bit about what you're going to be hearing. There's going to be a number of concepts introduced, beginning with my own story of how I got involved with this work and had my own healing crisis, which initiated me into a greater consciousness of what healing meant. So you're going to be exposed, for example, to the concept of homeopathy. That's not so much the idea of dropping little pills in your mouth, but it's the deeper spiritual idea that everything happens for a purpose, that an illness comes for a reason, a disturbance happens for a purpose. And the purpose of a problem is that it creates a counterbalancing situation to make something whole and right once again. And if that's the case, then we want to help this process, not try to fight it, not try to spray the illness with some kind of bug exterminating juice, but to listen to it and hear what it has to say. So you'll see that it's very important, if you're going to work as a transpersonal therapist, that you be comfortable with the spiritual purpose behind suffering, disease, or disturbance. And it's easiest to do that, and you can do it with the most authenticity if you yourself have discovered within your own life the purpose and meaning of illness or disturbance, suffering that you've gone through. And so you're going to be exposed to the principle of physician heal thyself, the wounded healer. The idea that through having woundedness within ourselves and experiencing firsthand the blessing that that is, that enables us to sit in a calmness, sit with compassion, and not try to exterminate the other person's problem, not try to fix it right away. Because we know that it's happening for a purpose and we can be with the client, whatever modality we're using, to help them embrace their problem, learn from it, and move along. So you'll be also being then exposed to the idea of finding the meaning in a problem, listening to what it has to say. And how you can help your client do that is that if you have faith from your own experience that the meaning is there to be found.
And to find the meaning then, we want to then look at ourselves in trouble, as if we're holding up a mirror. You're perhaps familiar with the metaphysical idea that all of life is a mirror and we are reflected in this mirror. Everything we experience is a reflection of ourselves, greeting us, asking for our recognition. I am you, thou art that, which is the perennial philosophy that you and your experience and the world out there are one. This is the fundamental spiritual premise, and illness sometimes comes along to help us make this discovery. Now, other things that you'll be encountering in this story, in this lecture, is terms having to do with alchemy, turning lead into gold, the lead of the problem, the gold of the self-realization. Alchemy concerns transformation. I think a great image of alchemy is cooking in the kitchen, where raw groceries is turned into food, something that you can eat. And so the alchemy of you sitting with the client, being with them, maybe, as you'll see, not even physically present, but nevertheless being with them in such a way that there is a transformation of fighting this problem, why me, and resisting it, to accepting it, embracing it, learning from it, and being changed. And your role in this alchemy is by your being in a healing way, being with a healing presence of love, acceptance, patience, listening, caring, these qualities. So what you're going to be hearing in this particular talk is me explaining then the rationale of this perspective. And this perspective permeates all of the different therapies, from past life therapy, body work, breath work, healing touch, spirit retrieval, you name it. That underneath it is that if you don't wish to be contributing to the problem by resisting it, then you need to have some appreciation for the transformative value of your own problems so that you can sit in a healing way with a healing presence with the other person as they go through their journey, their discovery, as their healing blesses them. Their problem brings greater awareness to them. Okay, so that's the general idea. That's what you're going to be hearing about. And now let's go and listen to me talk to the class of students at Atlantic University as I go into some detail about these kinds of ideas. About counseling or healing from a transpersonal perspective. And to do that, I'd like to begin by giving you a mythical perspective on the origin of who we are. Because a spiritual perspective on counseling, on healing, presupposes that you have a spiritual understanding of what we're about. Now, most myths of creation talk about the fact that the Creator, before the Creator created anything, was in a sleep, a slumber. And as the Creator awoke, that process of the Creator awakening and creating was a process of separating. In the Bible, for example, it talks about how God separated the heaven from the earth, separated the light from the dark, separated the male from the female. Lots of creating of polarity. We have in the Eastern tradition the notion of yin and yang, the two forces or two qualities or two poles, and there's a tension between them, a flip-flop, 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 that creates an electricity, an energy, a dynamic. Now, this same kind of process then of creation by dividing goes on in the creation of an individual. That is,
that as a baby is born by separating from the mother, but in their consciousness, for some time, the baby and the mother are as one. The baby doesn't experience itself as being separate from the environment. Then at some point, the little baby eats of the tree of knowledge and wakes up and recognizes, hey, I'm a somebody, there's the world out there, I'm here. And then turns, oh, and there's Mom, I didn't realize we were so far apart, and rushes over to Mom to be close again. And then once feeling secure, ventures out away to explore. And that's the beginning of what we would call the hero motif of the little kid going out on their own to be a somebody. Now, this same motif of the separation into the two parts goes on as the person develops. That is, they get a sense of themselves, who I am, and parts of themselves that they're not. In other words, to use Carl Jung's terms, we would have a sense of persona, of ego, of self, and then there's a quality of shadow, of parts of ourselves that we don't accept, that we tend to reject. We might reject parts of ourselves because our parents don't like those parts. For example, a little kid can be very boisterous and wild, and the parents say, hey, calm down now, and mind your manners. And the kid learns that the part that shouts and the part that hits and the part that's wild is not quite as acceptable to the parent as the part that's polite or the part that obeys, and so on. We learn in school that the teacher likes certain parts of us that do what we're told, but the teacher doesn't like the part that wants to rebel, that wants to deny what the teacher has to say. We learn to accept parts of us that are cautious, that look out for our own survival, and we tend to perhaps suppress parts of ourselves that are carefree, that are reckless, that act dangerously, because those characteristics could get us in trouble. All the while that we're developing, we're going through a process in which we are developing certain aspects of ourselves and arresting the development of other aspects. Now, the mystery of life seems to be, though, that it's as if the Creator wants really for us to experience all of everything, all of ourselves. So as we get too overdeveloped in a particular way and have something else suppressed, something seems to happen to call this to our attention. Now, the Native Americans have a very interesting word and concept for this process. And this word will take us right into a whole model of healing which we've identified in Western tradition as homeopathic healing. And homeopathic healing is distinguished from allopathic healing in that the illness is looked at as an ally. The illness is looked at as a guide. The illness is looked at as a helper. Now, what's the Native American concept? It's medicine. Medicine. In Native American tradition, medicine means something which gives you learning, which gives you strength, which helps you grow and gives you powers. Where do you get your medicine? You get your medicine from the problems and challenges that you meet in life. I want to tell you a story about myself that illustrates what I'm talking about, so that perhaps you can have a more concrete feeling for it. My story as a healer begins with my own illness, with my own problem. The problem happened to be alcoholism. I wouldn't have diagnosed it as that when I began, but when I look back, I could see that it was alcoholism, the problem, that was going to be my medicine. That is, my healing ability. What we have here is somebody, myself, who is in a state of say, confusion. I'm in my early 20s. I've already become a problem drinker. I think if you sat me down and asked me to be honest with myself, I would have admitted I think maybe I have a problem with it. It wasn't a big focus for me back then, but it was definitely there. Somebody suggests to me that I might like to get into my dreams and use my dreams as a way of exploring. I was really excited by that idea, but I realized I had never remembered any dreams for as long as I could think of. So I start to keep a dream journal, and it takes me many, many, many days, in fact over 3 months with that dream journal by my bed, before I'm able to finally remember a dream. Now, let me tell you the dream, because this dream is a story about medicine. In the dream, I'm camping in some kind of a sanctuary. It's a very special land, and I'm standing face to face with this old man. And we're on, like, in a barnyard area, and there I see behind him a flying goat that goes back and forth, and I think this is really magical. This is really special. This man must have special powers or abilities. I'm really excited to be here in this place with him. Then I look down on the ground and there's a haystack. And in the haystack I see an empty bottle of wine. And immediately I know that there's a drunkard that somehow snuck into this place, is sitting there in the haystack at night, boozing it up. And it seems like a sacrilege. I feel very righteous. Now notice that attitude. I'm saying indignant, bad, you know, and I say to the man, look, there's somebody that doesn't belong here, a bad guy, you know, a drunkard. He's coming into the holy ground and wrecking the vibes because of his behavior. We've got to find him. We've got to eliminate him. Now that right there is a picture of the allopathic approach to disease. There's the germ, right? Let's find the germ, let's cut the germ out, kill the germ. That's my attitude. Immediately, instinctively, let's get rid of it. What does the old man say? He looks at me deep into my eyes and said, Henry, that man, I invited him here. He's my guest. In fact, he's been here much longer than you, and I was just a recent arrival. He's my guest, and, he said, I put that wine there so that I could lure him in. I could lure him in so that I could feed him. And I could feed him, and I look down, and I see an empty jar of mayonnaise, and I see an empty bag of potato chips. And I'm all confused, you know, I'm thinking, potato chips and mayonnaise, what kind of food is that? And why would this guy, this old man who seems so wise, why would he put wine out for a drunkard and only make matters worse? You know, this is not right. This isn't what you do. And all the while that I'm thinking that and I'm confused, I can also feel from the old man a compassion for that drunkard, a larger perspective, and I sense inside of me a kind of pettiness, an orneriness, a judgmentalness, and I feel kind of ashamed about my attitude. And it's very confusing because on the one hand, I'm very upset about why are we giving wine to a drunkard and only encouraging his problem, but on the other hand, I'm feeling small, I'm feeling inadequate and ashamed of myself, and it bothers me a lot. And I'm agitated by it, and I just go off and leave, and I walk out into the woods. And having that dream, and I thought about the dream, I didn't know what it meant. I was very confused by it. The only thing that I could possibly take away at that point, because I was not into metaphysics yet, I didn't know anything about Edgar Cayce or spirituality. This was back in the 60s. This stuff was just
coming in was that the dream seems to be suggesting, if I were to trust that this old man really is a wise person, the dream seems to be suggesting that there's some purpose to the drinking problem. That's all that I could get from it, that there's a purpose to it. But what purpose? And what's this food? I mean, the food doesn't seem like health food. You know, it's not broccoli or, you know, rice and beans or anything like that. It's potato chips and like dip or something, you know, party food. I don't understand it. All I could think to do was to be, perhaps, if I could, a little bit more tolerant, a little bit more forgiving, or let's just say suspend judgment about my drinking. So I found that that was not that easy to do, because part of the pattern of alcoholism is waking up and feeling guilty and trying to repent all day until finally you get so tired of your heroic efforts that by 4 or 5 you're pooped and you want to go and have a drink to relax because you're so tired of trying to live the straight life, and so then you start drinking again and you just have this cycle. So I was going through that cycle. There's a process that went on, basically, of being beaten down by the natural sequence of events that happens very predictably in alcoholism. Repenting, going on the wagon, falling off the wagon. I can remember one time where I was going to have a party at my fiance's family's house, and they had already noticed that I had had this drinking problem, and they took me aside that night and said, we're going to have a party, there are going to be all these people here, we want them to meet our daughter's fiance, and we're hoping that you can kind of keep it cool, you know. And I said, oh, not to worry, I'll be a saint. Well, it didn't work out, I'll tell you. And I guess I really carried on, did all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm lying in bed the next morning, headache, and I don't remember the evening. I don't know how I got there. I hardly remember the party. And my girlfriend came in, and, well, Dad's kind of upset with you. And I said, well, I don't remember what I did, but I swear, I promise, it'll never happen again. It'll never happen again. 100% guaranteed. That's just not going to happen again. And she said, okay, and she leaves. And as the words were still echoing in my mind when I realized inside that the truth was that I was fooling myself. It was going to happen again, and it was going to happen again, and it was going to happen again. It was never going to stop. I was really helpless to do anything about it. I was caught in something bigger than me, and I ought to just face up to it. And it really scared me. That was the first time I was really, really scared, because I realized that in spite of all my protestations, in spite of all my swearing oaths and so on, I was not in control. And I think, you see, that was a healing moment for me to admit to myself that I was out of control. Now later when I got into AA, I recognized that's step 1, to admit that you're not in control and relinquish to another higher power. It wasn't too long after that I had a dream where I was feeling very bad, very low, nobody loves me, I'm not worth anything, and so on. And then out of the sky, this glowing bird comes flying down and swoops right into my chest, and I give it a big hug, and it's nestling against me, and I'm feeling, oh, somebody loves me, somebody loves me, and I start crying, and I wake up, and I'm still crying, and I'm just feeling really relieved, really good, because someone does care about me, and I go and seek therapy. A few months later, I found myself in the liquor store getting ready to make my purchase for that night when something stopped me. And it wasn't voluntary, it wasn't anything conscious, but somehow I knew that drinking wasn't an option for me anymore. I needed to go on in life. And if I were going to be drinking, then there's stuff I wasn't going to be able to do, and so it just wasn't an option. And I put my hand down and I walked out of the liquor store. I didn't quite understand what was happening. I felt a little sad. What was I going to do that night without my booze? But I got through the night, and as it turned out, I never drank again. Started going to AA, recognized that I did have the alcoholic pattern. And one of the things that was really an eye-opener for me, going to one of those meetings, was to see that a lot of the things that I had felt guilty about, the hangovers, the saying one thing and doing another, acting up, feeling amnesic, a number of different things, other people had the same stuff. That what I was experiencing wasn't so much an expression of my personality, it was an expression of the alcoholic syndrome. And I remember thinking at that time, I've been feeling guilty for going around in a circle, spinning around and around and around, very confused. But now I see I was in a whirlpool, and if you're in a whirlpool, you're going to spin around. And it's not your fault, it's the whirlpool that's spinning you around. If you'll get out of the whirlpool, you won't spin around anymore. And I was in that alcoholic pattern. A year or two down the road from that, my dream research has really progressed now. I'm starting to do some interesting experiments. One in particular is based on some of the dreams that I had had. I was setting up a healing dream tent where a person would spend the night in a tent out in the woods to have a dream that might help them about a problem. I worked out a ritual for it based what I thought was on some study of the anthropological literature on vision quests and so on. That I would have a person pretend that the tent was a sacred sanctuary and go through a role-playing enactment where they would meet a healing person and have an encounter with that person. And then as they were having that encounter, prepare for bed and invite the spirit of that wisdom and that healing to come into their dreams that night. And then I was thinking about that. I had the tent up. I was getting ready to go now and announce that it was here. I was like open for business, you might say. When all of a sudden I got this tremendous pang of no confidence in myself, self-doubt. That I have no business doing this. I don't know if it'll work. And then out of the blue, I remembered this joke from when I was a kid. And the joke was about this man, and remember this is a kid's joke, so he takes a kid's kind of an appreciation. But there was this man who had this disease. And his body was covered with scabs. And he peeled these scabs off and put them in a bag. And underneath the scabs were pus. And he drained the pus into a jar. And he kept this jar of pus and these scabs in his closet. Well, one day, this guy came to visit him. And for some reason, the guy was snooping around and went into the closet, where he got locked in that closet, and he was left there for 3 days. Then the old man there was time for him to work on himself again, and he opened up the closet. And this man came stumbling out, saying, "Oh my goodness, thank God for those potato chips and mayonnaise, or I would have starved." I went, "Ooh." But then I realized, there's my dream. There's the meaning of the dream. Spontaneously and out of the blue, this memory of this childhood joke reveals the meaning of the dream. In the dream, I look down there, the old man saying he puts the wine there so as to feed the guy. What's he feeding him? Potato chips and mayonnaise. And I'm saying, what kind of food is that? Well, and in the years since I'd had that dream, I had studied at the Jung Institute. I understood about the homeopathic principle, and I realized now with the aid of that joke, the homeopathic reference in the dream. And what was the dream saying? The dream was saying is that the old man was saying, I am going to feed this man his illness so that it will heal him and give him some strength. What was the strength? Well, when I started out, and why was I drinking? Because I was a control freak. Most alcoholics are after power, feeling very insecure, wanting something to buttress and support a very weak ego, feeling very alienated from life, wanting some kind of extra something. Always being on go, super achieving and so on. The alcohol is a soother. The alcohol relaxes. The alcohol gives you some feelings that everything's okay. Meanwhile, it could then soothe me while I was pushing forward on a 100% achievement power trip to try to get ahead in the world. Having to be brought to my knees through the alcoholism, though, taught me that there's more to life than being in control. The alcohol taught me about the existence of a higher power. The alcoholism taught me about the idea of being open to the spirit. I had changed my viewpoint as a result of dealing with the alcoholism. From wanting, the image that I used to use was that while I was an alcoholic, my favorite thing would have been to have had a speedboat with a huge motor on the back of it so I could go as fast as I wanted to. Once I was into recovery and recognized the importance or the existence even of spirit, I would now trade my powerboat for a sailboat in which I would have my sail to take care of and my oar to hold on to, but I would rely more on the wind to blow my sail, the wind being a representative of the spirit. So the alcoholism, supposedly a bad thing, was actually for me an initiation. It was a way of bringing me into a realization, a discovery, that there was such a thing as spirit. Without it, who knows what would have happened to me? I probably would have ended up being a one-sided individual, a one-dimensional person whose only thing in life was just to achieve, just to get ahead. I would have not been in touch with my feelings at all. Carl Jung, for example, he had played a role in the beginning of AA because one of the men came to him, and Bill W., who's founded AA, there's a couple of letters that was written back and forth between him and Carl Jung. And Carl Jung gives a Latin formula which basically says spirit against spirits. That a person who is into the spirits, the booze, the only thing that will help them is the antidote is to take in the real spirit. That is the spiritual life. And the spiritual life will cure the addiction to the spirits. That what the person is looking for in the bottle is spirit, but is getting caught at the first step. That's a homeopathic perspective a person approaches an illness for what they can get out of it. They're looking for the illness to give them something. The old man in my dream was leaving the wine there to initiate that man into the mysteries, the mystery of spirit. And now, on the other side of things, after this was all over, I was in touch with a kind of consciousness that I was totally unconscious of before, where I had a receptivity now that I never had before. I had an openness that I never had before. I had a humility that I never had before. Because before, I was thinking everything depends on me. I've got to do it all. And I've got to be strong. I've got to be invulnerable. I've got to be perfect. Afterwards, I recognized, hey, I'm inherently imperfect. That's okay. I can do my part, but everything doesn't depend on me. I can be helped by Spirit. I have to surrender my life to the flow of things. That's a very different orientation. And that allowed me then, that kind of orientation, to not only live and work differently myself, but be present with other people in a different way. Prior to that, if someone had come to me with a problem, I would have tried to fix them in some kind of heroic way, in the same way I was trying to fix me. After that, I could approach it differently. They come to me with a problem, I could be with them in their problem and not try to eradicate it right away, but listen to them, empathize with them, and let the experience of our encounter flow into something that would be healing. There's no way I could have done that before. That wouldn't have occurred to me. That wouldn't have been my orientation. I tackle their problem and help them be perfect just like I was trying to be perfect. So the alcoholism was a gift. It was my initiation. What the Native Americans would say, this was my medicine. It came in the form of a bottle. I had to drink it. I had to go through the suffering that that medicine was inflicting in me. And when I came out of it, I came out of it with a new power. Not the power of big muscles, but the power of a certain consciousness. What was that consciousness? An openness to Spirit. Okay, so the homeopathic then principle is that we all, very naturally, by the very nature of our being, we tend to form certain ideas, certain ego sense, and we suppress other things. Like I was all into achievement and nothing into friends. I was all into thinking and nothing into feeling. We all have these tendencies to get one-sided in one way or another. Life, however, loves us and doesn't want us to live a life in a one-sided way. So as to create a counterbalance, life comes up with medicines for us. Medicines in the forms of problems. Problems which are actually confronting us with the unlived half of ourselves, with undeveloped aspects, with the truths and things that we're suppressing. And if we will listen to the problem, rather than pushing it away, if we will try to be with the problem, learn from the problem, dialogue with the problem, befriend the problem, what it will do is bring us some things that we need brought out to make us more whole. And the word for healing, you see, comes from the word wholeness. Illness is a one-sided, out-of-balance situation. Healing is a restoration to wholeness. Not perfection, but wholeness. You look around at nature, there's an ideal of wholeness. Nature isn't perfect in that the trees can be gnarled, leaves can be brown, but as a whole it works. There's a balance and a flow, and it's self-sustaining, and it manifests the life that it's there to carry. Where we get out of balance and then we start cutting down on the amount of life that we can have pass through us. Being perfect some kind of ego notion, actually constrains the life. Now you take, for example, there's a common one today, is depression. Let's look at depression as a symptom. The normal state of affairs is we're out in the world, we're achieving, we're working hard, we're making money, we're getting famous, we're getting ahead, we're paying our mortgage, etc. Do. That's our cultural value. One day you wake up and you say, I don't feel like it. I don't care about anything. I feel gloomy. The doctors, everybody runs to you and says, what's wrong? What's wrong? Let's give you this drug. Let's give you this other thing. We'll get you up out of your depression so you can get back into the world and do, achieve. But what's the depression doing? The depression is a guardian angel coming into you. It's like nature saying, hey, you're getting so caught up in work, you've forgotten yourself. How can we restore you to yourself? So you look at what is the effect of depression. You lose interest in the outer world. You lose interest in doing things. You become preoccupied with yourself. See how perfect that is, though. You need to be preoccupied with yourself because you've been totally ignoring yourself. You've been so out there working that the depression is the perfect medicine for getting you to disengage from the world and go into a retreat. It's horrible, it's painful, it's awkward. You feel embarrassed, you feel ashamed, you should be out there, you're too preoccupied with yourself. That's not healthy. You struggle with it and resist it. Try to take some uppers. Say some positive affirmations. Every day in every way I'm getting better and better. Every day in every way better and better. Just not working. And you fight it and you fight it. Until finally you get so you say you can't fight it and you just be depressed. I feel lousy. Lousy. And you start listening to that and hearing it, lousy, yes, I'm not happy. Recognizing that you're not happy is the beginning of the cure. Why not I happy? What do I want in life? My life feels empty. What a realization! My life feels empty. Nothing is worth it. Wow, you see now what's happening? There's starting to be a shift in values. Nothing is worth it. What a thing to say. Here the person was go, 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 achieve, 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 work, work, work. As if that was the big value. And now somehow this depression is like acid eroding away that false value. But they're having to go through a dark night of the soul. Now if you happen to be with that person, how do you help them? Do you try to get them to do calisthenics? Give them some uppers and see if with some affirmations they couldn't go out there? Well, maybe try this sport, or go try this business, go try this. You know, to get up there and out, is that going to be helpful? Or perhaps being with them in their depression and being able to create an atmosphere in which you can say, oh, you feel like nothing has any meaning for you. Yes, it's very hard. Nothing seems to matter. And you can be there with them and help them face whatever this is and have a dialogue with it as if the spirit of depression were like an angel coming to visit them to give them a new message. That there's a lost person inside, a person who's been abandoned. Their real self who's crying out saying, when do I get any time? When do you going to pay any attention to me? I may not have any market value. You know, I may not be great on the job, but I'm worth something as a person. Are you going to pay some attention to me? And this draws the person in there and they meet this other aspect. And when by the time they've worked through the depression and coming out, they'll live a more balanced life. Yes, they work, but work isn't everything. They have some time for themselves. They have some time for friends, whatever. So, in the Native American approach then to medicine, what is it we're to do? A medicine then is a problem that's asking you to recognize the value of it. And how do you do that? is to be able to look at the problem like a mirror and see yourself in it. Look into it as if you were looking into a mirror. And the value of the healer from a spiritual point of view is to help be that kind of a mirror. A person who can be with another person in such a way that their presence helps that person see themselves in their problem. Be able to, in effect, then reclaim themselves. Each of us, when we come across a medicine and we're out of life, it's like we've lost our soul. We've lost touch with who we really are. And the problem, the medicine, has come to restore us to who we are. Can you then, as the therapist, not fix the person, but your presence be like a mirror so they can now see themselves, find themselves, because their problem is taking them on a journey of seeking to make contact with their lost self. And you, and working in conjunction with their problem, work as a mirror for them to finally see their lost self reflected there in it. Your ability to do that, where does it come from? Now the Native Americans have the notion of a witch doctor. Most indigenous people have the role of the shaman. The shaman is not a doctor in our sense of someone who's been trained in the techniques of healing, know how to operate, when to give aspirin and stuff like that. But the shaman is someone who's developed healing ability by being sick and having healed from it. The notion, the image of the wounded healer, that is a person whose healing ability has come from the process that they've been through themselves of having gone through something and come out the other end of it. Now that's like the story that I was telling you with the alcoholism. Very often in native cultures, somebody goes crazy, they get a horrible illness, goes into spasms, and the shaman recognizes here's a person who is being visited by the medicines, and as they ride through it, they come out the other end. Maybe that person is meant to be a healer themselves. We can help others only to the extent that we've learned how to help ourselves. We've come to understand the value of acceptance. We've understood and able to listen to ourselves. As we are able to listen and mirror within ourselves, then it makes it possible for us to listen and mirror to others. We'll find that if somebody is going through a process that is threatening to us, because we haven't gone through that, or it touches something in us that we haven't faced, our tendency will be to either push the person away, blame them for their problem, or try to fix them up real quick because we're feeling very nervous about it. If, on the other hand, we have been through such a process and we understand it and are accepting of it, we can help them have some acceptance of it, and we can take them or accompany them on a journey of recovery. Now, in the case of people who have disturbing psychic experiences, how does that fit into this model? You take a person who wakes up one morning and has had a horrible dream in which somebody has been smashed and cut up and so on, and it's like a nightmare for them, and they wake up in a sweat. The next day they see on the news that a body was found out in the woods, and it was police found this young person who was beat up and slashed and so on. And when the person who had the dream sees that on the TV, they say, "Oh my gosh, I dreamt that." And they recognize, hey, that wasn't just a nightmare, that was real. Wow, why would I have that? I'm very confused about this. This would be an example of a disturbing psychic experience. It didn't seem to serve any purpose. It wasn't like the dream would have helped them go on and prevented it. Many people are plagued with having, for example, dreams of airplanes crashing. They think, gosh, I could call, I could try to prevent this. What could I do? They can't do anything. They feel very upset about it, because why would they have this experience? Why would they be taken through this trauma of coming down out of the sky and crashing on the ground and feeling everybody hollering and frightened and so on, if they couldn't do anything about it, it's not serving any purpose. Sometimes they feel guilty that maybe if they dreamt it, maybe they helped cause it to happen. They're plagued by this. Well, what you find is, let's just treat these experiences, let's just pretend for a moment that these experiences are their medicine. Let's just pretend for a moment and assume in our model that they're having these experiences for a purpose. But the purpose relates to them and what it mirrors to them. If a person, and we all have these, person starts to ignore certain things about themselves because it's not convenient, because they're ashamed, because they feel guilty, because they don't know how to handle those feelings. Maybe a person got hurt by somebody and they just can't handle the pain, so they have to suppress it. Maybe a person hurt somebody else and they can't deal with the guilt, and so they have to suppress it. Maybe a person feels ashamed about some disfigurement or about some quirk in their character, and so they try to ignore it. But supposing the person needs to deal with that, supposing it's that for their own health, for their own wholeness, what they've pushed away, for some reason, they actually need to, if they're going to be whole. How are they going to be put in contact with this if they won't look at it? Well, maybe they could be put in contact with it vicariously. You know how sometimes it's easier to deal with someone else's problems than with your own. You know, perhaps say like, you're not happy with your husband. He's kind of ignores you, and he doesn't really pay much attention, and he dismisses you a lot, and you feel very lonely and very sad, but there's nothing that you can do about it because you have no other income. You're totally dependent on him, and you feel very guilty that you can't do anything about it, ashamed that you don't have more strength of character to take action, and so you just push the whole thing down. You push down the fact that you're lonely. You push down the fact that you're very needy because there's nothing you can do about it, you say, so just put it behind you. But the fact of the matter is that you do need to take some action. You do need to recognize this. Well, it's interesting how then life will have a way of putting you in with somebody who's going through something similar. And they start telling you about how their spouse ignores them and so on. And you find yourself telling them, hey man, you shouldn't take that. Stand up to the person and tell him. Or why don't you start going back to school or something, and then you could find yourself a job and you can get out of there. And you find yourself telling that person all these things that you'd be telling yourself if you were going to deal with it. But it's hard for you to deal with it with yourself. So you deal with it vicariously by the way you react to this person. Now suppose there is no person like that in your life. No one with whom you can vicariously work through your problem. Well, then maybe you can jump the boundaries of time and space and psychically seek out such a person and dream about their life or their problems, or have psychic impressions about their problems. And that would give you a source where you could see yourself unconsciously reflected in their life. You could vicariously, in an effect, grow antibodies to your situation without having to face it yet in yourself. Grow the antibodies by facing their situation. Now, we had an account of this exactly that happened, where this young woman dreamt of this molested and mutilated and murdered little kid. A couple of days later on the news, the kid is found. They found this kid mutilated, molested, murdered. A dog found the body. The girl who had the dream was shocked because in her dream she was led to the scene by a dog. She's freaked out. Why would I have such a dream? What's it mean? she started to contemplate on this, and we started to work with her and help her start reflecting on the experience